Welcome to Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth. Gary Helt is excited to bring you another powerful conversation to help you grow and protect your business and finances. Today's episode is hosted by a special guest, personally selected by Gary, so you can keep learning and moving forward even when Gary is off the mic. Settle in and enjoy today's insights.
So welcome to Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth, the podcast that helps business owners make smarter financial decisions for lasting success. I'm your guest host, Jack Reeder, financial advisor with the Bullfinch Group. Today, I'm joined by Phil Zuckerman, national lead faculty for Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses, and a man with nearly 50 years of entrepreneurial experience. Phil has helped hundreds of business owners grow stronger, more successful companies by developing mindsets and skill sets around opportunity, resource organizing, and smart leadership. We'll be digging into what separates businesses that just make money from those that build wealth. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jack. Nice to be here.
Let's go into the Wayback Time machine and tell me, how did you get your start in business?
Well, I guess where I would start is to say that I wanted to be a poet and things failed. I wasn't that good at it. So somebody in college, I went to the University of Denver in Denver, Colorado, and somebody in college, one of the faculty members gave me a printing press. And so I started printing things on my printing press, and I started printing poetry, pamphlets that other people had written, and then became enamored with the idea of being a publisher rather than being a poet. And so when I turned 25, I started my company, Applewood Books, and as a publisher of poetry. And one thing led to another, and a lot of pivots along the way. But about 4 years later, I brought in some capital from one of my friends from college and his family. And we sort of changed things around a little bit. And then brought in some more capital in the mid 1980s. And at that point, started really thinking about business as business. Had a board of directors who really pushed me to understand the three financial statements and to really begin to think about metrics as a way to drive a business, and thinking about what we'd been successful with and what we hadn't been successful with. And then, things sort of went from there.
Wow, that's a great story. Just out of curiosity, did you start the company in Colorado or on the East Coast?
No, I started it. It started on July 4th in 1976. So that was a very, big day, the bicentennial, right?
Yeah.
And it started it in my basement in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It actually wasn't my basement. It was a place I was renting. But I'd set up a little workshop down in the basement, and I was binding things by hand. My last binding by hand was completed on 4th of July. So I call that my founding date. And that was very curious because later on we became publishers of Americana as part of our pivot. And so it was, very appropriate to begin there.
Excellent. So you've spent decades helping other small business owners. What's the biggest financial mistake you see entrepreneurs make early on?
Oh, well, I would say that early on, the mistake they make is that they don't really have an understanding of finance. This is I think the founder's problem in small business. Most people start with a passion or a purpose, right, rather than really a financial goal. And the mistake is that they don't really understand the dynamics of finance. So they don't really get the idea that there's a thing called a margin, and there's a thing called overhead, and there's a thing called profit. So I think that's where they begin their errors. And it gets compounded as they have success early on. Or if they have failure, it sort of gets multiplied as well. So there's not really a good solution to that except to begin to understand your finances.
Okay. And so kind of getting to the nut here, from your experience, what separates a business that grows revenue from one that actually builds wealth?
Oh, that's a really great question, because in my opinion, you can do both, or you can do one, and maybe one leads to the other. But it really depends on your industry. One of the great things that happened to me was that I was able to set up a board of advisors, and on that board was somebody who had M&A experience in the publishing industry, right? And he gave me some advice as I was thinking about exit. This was sort of later in my career. Um, but as I was starting to think about exit later in my career, he said, don't focus on your EBITDA, focus on your revenue, because that's the multiple that publishing industry looks at. And so it really depends on your industry to some extent, right? And it depends on, your exit ideas to some extent. But wealth building is definitely fitting your foot into the shoe that is your industry, and making sure that uh, you do the thing that you need to do to begin to, put your company in a position to exit.
So basically to find out and then figure out how to make your company valuable to
It's
someone
most valuable. Yeah, yeah.
who
And there's a
wants to
lot of
buy it.
other things, besides revenue that leads to value, right? Customer is, a very important part of it. Process is a really important part of it. Right? So there's a lot of components to building a company for exit, right? That I think are, really important to be focused on, not just revenue, because you can see examples of companies that sell to larger companies at high multiples, right? And those high multiples are not necessarily what the industry is, but because some special aspect of the business itself, its strategic value to the buyer. And so, figuring out those levers, I think, is really important as you think about building wealth.
Okay. And another question, maybe if you could make a distinction or discuss, you know, the difference or how they relate between cash flow and
Hmm.
profit. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel pretty good when, money's coming in the door. They can do a lot of things.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, because a lot of people come into, these programs, especially 10KSB, which I'm involved with, which is the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. They come into the program without a real understanding of cash flow, and feeling like I need to raise capital. That's like almost virtually everybody comes in with the idea that, oh yeah, this is going to give me access to capital because I need capital, right? And then, build the thing, that we really promote is the idea of building out your financials, looking at, that's 5 years, and taking a look at what it looks like from a cash flow standpoint, from a profitability standpoint. And oftentimes, I would say 75% of the time, a lot of the cash flow, a lot of the capital needs, right, can be solved by figuring out cash flow solutions, taking the levers of cash flow and kind of moving them one direction or another. So, it's very important that businesses solve the cash flow problems. And of course, if you're going to build your company, you have to have capital. So the best way to provide capital is by having profits in the company. So these are sort of almost two separate items in essence, right? The cash flow keeps you alive and keeps you going, right? And the profitability allows you to grow your business. There are other ways to grow. You can bring in partners. You can acquire other businesses with leverage, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but those that leverage is not something that you can really get to unless you have a good cash flow. and profitability. So,
Okay, so when you say, the entrepreneurs are thinking, okay, I need capital, would you say that most of them initially are thinking borrowing money from a bank as opposed to bringing
um,
in investor capital, or
it depends on the risk, the level of risk that each entrepreneur brings, right? Their own sense of risk, right? There are a lot of entrepreneurs that come in who really don't want to have any debt, right? And we see that, and there are others who just feel very comfortable being highly leveraged. So, um, you know, I would say I was one of those.
okay. Yeah, and I would imagine that there are others who don't like the idea of bringing in investors because they don't want to give up
Well, exactly.
ownership.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is definitely true. And so, the message there is, okay, build your business so that it provides working capital, and then you will never have to give up a piece of your business to somebody else, right? Until you're ready to exit.
Yeah. Um, so what would you say, thinking of the people that come into the program, the Goldman Sachs program, and first of all, how long is the program for a
I
participant?
think 12, 13 weeks, something on
Okay.
those lines. Yeah.
So what would you say is uh, what the difference between someone who's starting and now finishing in terms of their ability to not only understand but to be able to actually run their business differently because of the new knowledge that they have about the financial aspect?
Well, I would say, first of all, I would say that most of the scholars, and we call them scholars who go through the program, are really they're exposed very early on in the program to financial statements and to trying to understand or to develop an understanding in them, a mindset and a skill set to be able to look at financial statements and understand what's going on. So that's super important. And I would say the significant shift there is that a huge number of the scholars decide that their accountant, their bookkeeper is insufficient and go to look for somebody who is better equipped to serve them. And a lot of times serve them in their industry rather than just somebody who is general in nature. So that's a big mind shift for people coming through the program, and it happens early on in the program. And then, when we talk about the finance piece, right, there's a lot of other, parts to the program. We deal with leadership and employees and marketing and process, but we also talk about exit and valuation. And that's a big shift for them also to understand that there may be value here in what they're doing and that there could be an opportunity to cash in on that value in the future.
So roughly, what would you say the typical scholar is thinking when they first start in terms of the the remaining time before an exit? Could it be, like I'm thinking about this next year, so that's why I'm here, or that's not even on my mind. It might happen someday, 20 years from now.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of an interesting part, Jack, because I think that many people assume that entrepreneurs are people who, will run a business for 5 years and sell it, then start another one 5 years and then sell it, and
The
then
ser
that
the
this sort of
serial
cycle, the
entrepreneur.
serial entrepreneur, people think about that, right? But the ones who are really in in the program are much more passionate about their businesses. They're much more purposeful in what they do, right? They come from a place where the product or service that they're providing is very personal to them. And they have very strong missions and they have very strong visions, right? So that's sort of the mindset that comes through. And they are less likely to be turning their businesses very rapidly. So these are very long-term strategies that many of
Yeah.
them have, although they burn out. And so that, the burnout sort of causes people to want to get rid of this thing, that's the albatross that's around their neck. It's, entrepreneurs are interesting folks.
So, a little more of a, you know, question about running the business. One of the things, regardless, I guess, of the business is pricing their product or service.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts, or what do you teach or counsel these scholars when it comes to, how do you, about pricing?
Yeah. So it's my bottom line on pricing is, price value, price for value. And that is, you don't want to compete for price, right? You want to really place that price point at, because you've created value and the consumer, your customer, sees that value. There's a differentiation in there. You have a value proposition that's really strong, right? And think about your competitive advantage and how you can leverage that to create more value.
What's the most common mistake that you find people having priced too low, or that they're priced too high and they're not delivering an
Yeah,
appropriate
well,
value?
oftentimes the service business is, such that people have to price it according to how they feel about themselves, right? So, some sense, it's about your own, self and worth and how you feel about the value of what you do. Uh, and I would say that that's a very tricky area, and we really encourage people to understand the value of what it is that they are delivering.
Do you find people often take for granted how valuable their service is, and they undervalue it because it's like, you know, that's just the way we do things, and they don't
Yeah,
recognize
sometimes.
how good they are at it sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. That they're really not understanding how much they're delivering. And so articulating that, and this is one of the things that I believe in a lot, is that for everything that we do, we need to write things down or they don't really exist. And so, understanding your value proposition, writing it down, making sure that you have your points in hand always for your team and for your customer and for whomever else you're interfacing with as a stakeholder. But understanding that value proposition is incredibly important. And what it does is it magnifies your margin, and that's where entrepreneurs live, right? Everybody lives in margin. We exist because of the customer giving us cash, but we live in the margin, and that's what makes the difference from one business to another.
Um, so this may be skipping ahead a little bit, but 12, 13 weeks, the scholars go through the program. Tell me about what happens, or what's available to them after they are gone from the program, and also just from personal experience, how often do you get to, sort of stay in touch and find out, how they're doing after they've been in the program? How does that work?
Yeah, well, there's approximately 17,000 alums of the uh, 10,000 Small Business Program, and that's over 15 years that they've been running the program. That's a lot of alums, right? There are all kinds of alumni seminars and events and things. And I just got back a couple weeks ago from Washington, where there was a summit, and there were 2,200 uh, alums who went to Washington to have presentations and to meet and greet one another, and then to lobby also on, Capitol. Hill, and it was very interesting time because the government was closed at the time. So that was
Mm.
an interesting moment. But it
Yeah.
was nonetheless, we had some really very wonderful meetings with congressmen, senators. It was and their aides, and it was just such an amazing moment to be around those entrepreneurs whose stories everyone has an incredible story.
And is that an annual event
Not
or?
really. No, they do it every once in a while. There's no
Yeah.
necessarily rhythm to it that's fixed.
But you've been to a few,
Uh,
or is that
I was at a virtual one, and then I was at this one. So there was another one during COVID that I felt I didn't really feel like I wanted to travel. So
so? At this one, I'm just curious. You must have run into some of your former
oh, tons. Yeah, yeah,
scholars,
yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah.
that must have been really
And oh,
rewarding.
so fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so great to see them and see what they're doing and see, what they've taken from the program and how much love they have for it and each other. And this peer-to-peer piece is just so unbelievable. So,
Mhm. So I don't know anything about this, but I wanted to ask about Opportunity, the
oh
musical.
yeah.
So tell me about it, and also, how it is used or contributes
Yeah.
to your business
Yeah,
coaching or
definitely.
teaching.
I we were in the other lead faculty members and I were in a meeting, and somebody was talking about having a music thing, playing music in the classroom, and I just decided that that would be really interesting to explore. And so I began writing songs for my class, right, that were about the subject matter that we were addressing at the moment. And I think it was very effective to help to build mindsets and a sense of accessibility to the content that, made it fun and made it not so intimidating. So, so then I began thinking about that and thought, well, why don't I use some of these AI tools to create something that could be the story of an entrepreneur from founding to success, if you will, and with a lot of pivots along the way and failure built into the thing, right? But at the end of the musical, there's what's known as a deus ex machina, which is like, somebody comes out of the sky and solves all the problems, which doesn't often happen in business, but it is a great ending to the musical. But so anyway, it's a 14 act musical that I perform on Zoom occasionally, and but decided to set up a website that would be about this sort of mindset building as what I call the wheel of entrepreneurship, right? As people go through the wheel of entrepreneurship, which is cyclical, by the way, it just keeps on going. And as they go through that, to give them a place where they have tools and also to do some workshopping around some of the things that I'm interested in workshopping. So the site opportunity.com has become a little bit more than just the musical, which is there, but now it's like morphing into a whole bunch of other things, which are resources and workshops and the musical. And but anyway, it's always changing. So who knows where it's going to go next?
So does the musical have a future in theaters? Might we be?
Oh no, no,
No.
it's a 1 hour strictly. I edited it to 1 hour. It's got bot actors, so it's got
Okay.
AI generated actors who introduce a scene, and then each scene is a video of about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. That is a video with a song and then some video background that goes along with it that illustrates the song. And each one is about a sort of a different theme. It starts off with the main character is named Rodolfo, and he is starting a top hat business. And he is starting that business because his grandfather was a top hat maker and taught him when he was a little kid how to make top hats. And so he wanted to go back and honor his grandfather, right? So he creates a company calls, which he's, named after his grandfather, and it's called Pop's Toppers. And so he starts this, and the first song is sort of the founding story of this business and his memories of his grandfather. So a lot of it is this sort of rich gratitude piece, right? Being grateful for things, for people, for those who came before us, right? Which is, and also the passion to do something and the why of what he is doing, right? So it starts there, and then he meets people along the way. He meets a banker. His best friend is an investment uh, advisor. He's got some other things going on, and it it kind of morphs into the ending, which, as I say, is like enormous success for Rudolfo.
That's great. I'll have to take a look, and I
Yeah,
will.
definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about, you know, I mentioned in the intro, skill sets and mindsets, and we've kind of been talking little more about skill sets than mindsets. So tell me, how about the mindsets that you think are important for entrepreneurs to learn or uh, to be able to adopt.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a really great question. Um, so we I sort of articulate things like problem solving, gratitude, empathy, self-awareness, innovation,
Like
orientation.
self-confidence you mentioned before.
Yeah, orientation towards a team, orientation towards process, orientation towards finance, a sense of risk tolerance, like we talked about. Are people risk averse or are they risk tolerant? Uh, Leadership components, resource cultivation, recognizing opportunities, and building value. So I think those are the core mindsets that I think about when I think about um, what a entrepreneur needs
And
to
I'm
grow.
sure I'm sure the scholars when they come in, some are stronger in some and weaker
Yeah,
in others, and uh, probably all over
definitely. Oh my gosh, yeah,
quite a
yeah. I
spectrum.
mean, this is yeah, and a lot of times the mindset recognitions, right, are things that you haven't really articulated, right? But you know that there's some growth opportunities in that, and having a growth mindset is sort of at the root of all of it to make sure that you don't feel fixed and you don't feel like you can't learn anything, but that you really can, grow. I uh, I was introduced to a book by Carol Dweck called Mindsets uh, many years ago by one of my very close friends who did culture change work, and it was just it really opened my mind to the ideas of mindset development and how important it really is in building a business. And
Yeah, I've
not
actually
just building a business, but building a life, Jack. It's not business. Building a business is only one way that you create wealth, right? And success. And it's this building a life, right? That, your business, I think, probably a third of your wealth should come from your business and the rest should come from other places. But that's uh, part of it. And then, of course, what people think of as success, right? It can have a lot of non-financial aspects in how you feel about your life as a success. So those are things that I think are really important to be building
yeah, I've
on.
actually I've heard of that book before, and I should read it. So I think I will. So I've got
Yeah,
two things to do.
she was in education, right? And it was about students who didn't have a growth mindset versus those who had fixed minds, I mean, or who did have a growth mindset. So she distinguishes between these two things. the fixed mindset and the growth mindset.
Great. So let's think about exiting.
Yeah.
Someone who's really now let's say whether they've been in program and now they've been out for a while or whatever. Any business owner who's really like, what, my main thing is I got to figure out how I'm going to exit this business. What would you say is the most important thing or things that they need to be focused on in terms of not the process of selling or exiting, but the creating more value? We talked a little bit about it in the beginning. It's very industry specific, but assuming
Mhm.
they're focused on the right things for their industry, what are the
Yeah.
things you would advise them to more of
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah. So, but let me just start. But yeah, I definitely will address that. But let me just start by saying that I think for most entrepreneurs, they live on the edge of success and failure, right? And that, traveling through that, there's always this in your mind, there's always this idea, okay, the downside, how do I prepare for the downside,
The
right?
worst case
The
scenario.
worst case, right? And how do I prepare for the upside, right? And this is, to me, the downside is the place where you think, okay, let's talk about exits, right? Like the lowest kind of exit that you want is bankruptcy, right? But that exit, right, is something that entrepreneurs think about, right, as they go through, because they're always feeling like they're on the edge of failure, right? And so, and maybe you think about the, top exit strategy might be going public, let's say, right? But I don't think that any of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business scholars alums have gone public. So I don't think that's really much of an option for entrepreneurs who are in the category that we're talking about here. And but finding a strategic buyer might be, second on the list of the most value that you're going to get out of your business through exit. And so I think focusing on your own goals, right? What is your personal goals for exit? And some people think, oh, I want to sell this to my employees. I want to give this to my employees. Whatever it is that your sense is, I want to pass this down to my children, right? So there are many different ways to sort of approach exit, but I think understanding what your personal approach is going to be is really important early on in your business. Not to say that it can't change, right? But just to understand where you're headed with exit and where you think it's going to be. A lot of people want to give it to their children or have their children take over and then find out as their children grow up that children don't even want the business, right? So
Right. Seen
that's
that.
exactly. We've all seen that. And you've got to be prepared to think about, oh, okay, my kids don't want it. What do I want to do? The other thing is that sometimes businesses throw off more value to an owner uh, by holding on to it than they would get by selling it, right? So you have to be always thinking about, like, where's the value? What is it? But I would say that in thinking about exit, right, understanding what your exit is going to be, preparing your company for exit immediately, right, is the important thing to do, right? Whatever that might be. Making sure your processes are in place, right? Your systems, you've got great systems, right? Making sure that your model works and that you're throwing off profits and paying taxes too, right? Because that's even though it's hard to do, it shows the value of the company. And paying yourself a good salary also in that process, right? Which shows any potential buyer that they could step in and make money at what it is that's going on. So I think,
So almost like, you could get that phone call tomorrow from someone saying, "Hey, I'm
yeah,
interested. Let me take a look." You want to be
yeah, and
prepared.
you can
Or something
just
might
sell it.
happen to you where maybe it's medical or something else, God
Yeah,
forbid, where you say, "Okay, I really need to do this sooner
yeah,
than I
yeah.
expected."
Yeah. And I would say also insurance is very important for entrepreneurs, right? In that regard, right? So if something did happen, that there is insurance, because the value of a company might plummet, on the death of its founder, right? So,
Right. Um, okay, this is great. We could go on. I would certainly love to talk further, and we will, but we're nearing the end of the podcast. One final question. If you could give every small business owner just one financial principle to live by, what would it be?
take care of your customer. Uh, that is your ticket. And getting new ones, keeping the old ones, treating them well, and then making sure that you stay in the margin and make money at what you're doing.
Excellent. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Jack.
That wraps up today's episode of Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth. Big thank you to Phil Zuckerman for sharing his incredible and most interesting insights and helping us all think differently about how we build lasting financial success. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast and share it with another business owner who's ready to grow smarter. I'm Jack Reeder with the Bullfinch Group. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's not just about growing your business, it's about growing your wealth.